Hello and welcome to this video. Right, let's talk 80s Mahavishnu Orchestra. Right, so we're going to be looking at these two albums as a whole. Right, so what have we got going on here? So, in the 1980s, surprisingly, around about 1984, John Mcgofflin announced he was reforming the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Or was he? Right, I was around when this album came out. This first album here, I actually had it for Christmas in 1984. This one here. And as you can see, it is not called Mahavishnu Orchestra. This is Mahavishnu. Right, that's the name of the band. If you look on the spine here is very beaten up, but you can see it's Mahavishnu. This is not the Mahavishnu Orchestra, really. It's not John Mcgofflin's intention for this to be the Mahavishnu Orchestra. It is a band called Mahavishnu. No, he's using the name, right? But it's not the same thing. I think that's quite important to bear in mind. This is something else. Do we class this as being as part of the Mahavishnu canon? Well, for me, I don't. I class this as being part of the John Mcgofflin solo canon, right? And this is 80s John Mcgofflin. And 80s John Mcgofflin is quite troublesome. So what happens after the Mahavishnu Orchestra stops? He forms Shakti. Shakti's absolutely incredible acoustic jazz group. We need to have some videos, I think, on Shakti at some point. Right. Then he brings out an album, Electric Guitarist, which he returns to electric guitar, which is the first of a number of albums where he's done this, where he's sort of pulled lots of different musicians together. And it's a sort of retrospective look of what he's done. He then forms the One Truth Band. Now, the One Truth Band exists in a number of different forms. There seems to be the One Truth Band that is on Electric Dreams, and then the live One Truth Band. Go and check them out. I think they were as great as the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Really incredible group. Not represented well, album-wise. Since then, there's been a live album come out, and I think live at Montreux. And that's it shows how incredible that band was. After that, he forms a band called the Translators. He's now moved to Europe, and Translators is an acoustic band again. So he's moving between electric and acoustic. This is where we start to see this thing with John Mcgofflin. He seems to move between electric and acoustic for a number of years. So the Translators is good. It's great. I have discussed those albums on my John Mcgofflin album. I don't think they need any more discussion. What we see with the Translators is the 80s production values starting to creep in. So by the time we've got to this is almost could be seen as John Mcgofflin's music, but put through the 80s production values, and also the new sensibility that has emerged in jazz fusion. So in the 70s, early 70s, jazz fusion is a very exploratory, avant-garde, hippie linked psychedelic blow your mind type of music. I think that's where we're coming from. It's much closer to some bands like Pink Floyd and Yes and King Crimson. I think the audience are definitely, substances are enhancing the appreciation of that. But as fusion carries on through the 70s, they start to make more and more commercial records which appeal to the dance floor. The amount of fusion which is actually exists because of disco music is a high proportion, and this creates a form of music called what do you call it, light jazz. I call it Fusac, and I've been a little bit critical of it on this channel. That influence is definitely here on this. It's definitely got a contemporary 80s fusion sound on there. But this is compounded by the fact that John Mcgofflin is predominantly playing guitar synth. So the lineup of this is predominantly on this album is drums, bass by the great Jonas Hellborg, drums by Billy Cobham. Now there's the Mahavishnu link. This is why I've always felt that this one more than the other one for me. This is the better of the two. I think most people like Adventures in Radioland, and it's simply because there's electric guitar on this. But I think the guitar synth on this for most people puts people off. But for me, having Cobham on here and hearing John Mcgofflin back with Cobham was an incredible thing, right? And I think that was worthy of putting the title Mahavishnu on it. Maybe not Mahavishnu, but definitely Mahavishnu. But what you hear basically is Billy Cobham on drums, Jona Helberg on bass, who was the next bassist. He was the hot bassist at the time, next in the lineage from Jaco Pastorius. We've got Bill Evans from the Miles Davis Band on saxophone. The saxophone's really key here because it gives it more of a Brecker Brothers sound than a Mahavishnu sound. And then we got Mitchell Foreman on keyboards. On here, all John Mcgofflin compositions except which one's by Bill Evans? I forgot. Clarendon Hills by Bill Evans. So it's all John Mcgofflin's. It's a John Mcgofflin vision here, and what you hear is the keyboards, and then the keyboard sounds of John Mcgofflin's guitar synth. So it's basically really difficult to pick out who he is on here. There's one electric guitar solo on Night Riders, which is absolutely fantastic, but again, as I've said elsewhere, really sounds like some of the contemporary more metal guitar playing. It almost sounds like he's tapping. I think he's doing it all with one hand, but it sounds like he's doing sort of Eddie Van tapping it on that at one point, so they're trying to sell records. He's trying to make something that will, for his major label, because this is on Warner Brothers, that's it. He's trying to get something that will fit into that modern, 80s fusion sound, and yet will still convey his ideas. And I think the creative thing, the interesting thing for me, is the guitar synth work. It is one of the great guitar synth albums. It's absolutely fantastic. A lot of people who saw this live said that the guitar synth live was a revelation. To hear John Mcgofflin playing with these sounds coming out was incredible. Without that visual thing, I think you lose that. But I think creatively, that's what makes this album so great. But for me personally, the compositions are very strong on this album, and Billy Cobham's influence on here really, pushes it to another level. As does the other musicians. It's an absolutely fantastic band. It's beautifully recorded. There's a lot of great things about this album. Again, when we discussed Inner Worlds, putting it under the Mahavishnu banner, well, I don't know. I think it just diminishes it being under there. But is it under the Mahavishnu banner? I think this is the big point I wanted to make here. This is a different band, isn't it? Right, so it's followed up by this album, Adventures in Radioland. Now, the band's changed. Cobham's gone. Right, if you actually look at the credits on that album, they, I think it says here, let's have a look. Additional percussion by Danny Gottlieb. There's no additional percussion on there. They've just name-checked it, because I think, Cobham had gone. By the time this album had been finished, Cobham was gone. I think some sort of business disagreement had emerged, and he'd gone. And so they've got Dan Gottlieb in on the live stuff, and then Dan Gottlieb carries on to here. Now, I love Dan Gottlieb's playing with Pat Metheny, but I feel he's the wrong drummer. So this band does not have the Cobham thing underpinning it for me. All right. Of the compositions on here, I think we got 10 compositions. 5 are by John Mcgofflin. So this is much more of a band effort. And I often feel that with John Mcgofflin, when other composers start to come in, his vision does get diluted a little bit. So the tunes like The Weight, Just Ideas, which is by Mitchell Foreman, Half Man, Half Cookie, which is definitely by Bill Evans. If you've ever heard The Alternative Man, which is one of the great 80s fusion albums by Bill Evans, it really takes a sort of excuse me, I got a cough. It really takes that sort of art of noise production values of the 80s and sticks it into fusion. It's an incredible album. And all this stuff's great, but what we hear is compositionally, now we're going in a number of different directions. But what is great about this album is John Mcgofflin does pull the Les Paul out and sticks the distortion on, and he plays, some of his guitar playing is absolutely incredible on here. And if you really want to, if you really want to find an album where you can appreciate John Mcgofflin playing fast with electric guitar with a ton of distortion on, this is the album for you. And I think there's so many people out there that it's that aspect of John Mcgofflin that draws them in. And at this point in the 80s, it was this album that did it for them. I've often felt the production is not as clean as the first album. This is not on Warner Brothers, they're on Relativity Records. And Relativity Records at the time, of course, were putting out a lot of the sort of heavy metal Satriani type stuff in the 80s. But it's a great album. This is a good album. They're both really good albums. You know, on my when I if you go back to my first video when I ranked them all together, you know, I ranked these albums as being lower than Inner Worlds. I've gone through them again, and I don't know if that would be the case. You know, I think compositionally these albums are stronger. I think John Mcgofflin's guitar playing, from that point of view, these albums are stronger than that. So, you know, there's something about it. I think if you're a Mcgofflin fan, that's the one to go for if you want to hear him playing the guitar. But if you want to hear his compositions and you want to hear him with Cobham, this. So I've got to be honest. If I get them both the right around, put them next to each other here. These albums are both as good as each other, and they both have their own merits. Something worth mentioning, right? Again, look at the title: John Mcgofflin and Mahavishnu. Right? This one is simply Mahavishnu. This one is John Mcgofflin and Mahavishnu in little letters. Let's just check the inner sleeve. At no point, fantastic, when you open this album, we've got a fantastic photo of John there, you know, on the original sleeve. And this is, oh, look at this. This shows the production values, and I've never noticed this before. Yeah, if we look here on the actual album, this is the original copy when it came out. It's John Mcgofflin and Mahavishnu. On the actual album, they've spelt the name wrong. Right? It's on the other side too. You know, this is the original copy. This cover here disappeared, and it's no longer the cover. I'm not too sure what that is, why that is. Maybe there's something about this cover that people didn't like, or maybe just didn't sell the album. You know, don't know. I never quite understood that. But yeah, look, there's a definite drop in production quality on this second album, and I think that's really proved my point. I can see it in the packaging. You know, if we look at the graphic design on this one, if we look at the graphic, that's absolutely beautifully. That's Warner Brothers graphic design team here. This here is actually pretty. Let me just put all this back. All that is pretty ugly. I think John Mcgofflin in the 1980s, he gets a little bit lost, to be honest. I think the reason of that is because after playing such a huge part in the 70s and then relocating to Europe, he sort of cannot carry on. He has to sort of pull himself in and decide where he's going to go next. Some of my friends who are big Mcgofflin fans, we've discussed this, a lot of them feel that round about 1978, after the dissolution of Shakti, that actually there's something leaves Mcgofflin's muse. There's something that's no longer there in terms of his compositions and the way he plays. That's a sort of inward struggle has gone, and he becomes a very, very sophisticated jazz fusion artist, like so many others. And I think there's a case for that. And I think that's what you get when you listen to these albums and you search around for that thing that, you know, Birds of Fire or Minneman and Flame or Visions of the End and Beyond has, which is this sort of screaming sort of expression of the human soul in torment, trying to find some redemption. That's what I first heard when I heard Birds of Fire, and I heard that guitar solo as a young kid, and it chimed with me, you know, when I heard that. These albums aren't like that. This is really well executed, polished 80s jazz fusion with all the production values there. And so what differentiates these two albums is the slight lack of production values on the second album. That's probably why I'm talking about that so much on this video. After this album, John Mcgofflin sort of disappeared a little bit. You know, he was doing a duo with Jonas Hellborg, and I was really into Mcgofflin by this point. So I'm going through all the music papers, and I could see he was doing little concerts. He's also cropping up on guest appearances on various albums. He plays on You're Under Arrest by Miles Davis, and then he crops up again on the Miles Davis album that's the title of it, Aura, which is perhaps Miles's greatest album from the 1980s. And he's absolutely fantastic on there, playing electric guitar. He crops up on, like I said, on Alternative Man by Bill Evans. He's on Dan Gottlieb's solo album playing acoustic. And then he comes back with the Royal Festival Hall, album with his trio with Trilot Gertu and Kayet Gart, who then gets replaced by Dominic De Piazza. That trio, to me, he's got back in the saddle there. Mcgofflin's now doing something that can't just be classed as standard 80s jazz fusion, or Fusac. It's not that. And these albums do have a little bit of that on there. And it's not that. The trio is very interesting. He's pioneering new things again. Trilot Gertu, his approach to drums is absolutely unique. He's playing guitar, but with guitar synthesizer linked in. The trio's acting in a way which is unlike any other jazz trio that's been there before. He's back in there. And since then, he's done all sorts of really interesting things. But I don't think he's really been able to capture what the Mahavishnu was about. But what musicians do, very few musicians are able to really, once they do that thing that makes them famous, it's very difficult to do that again. This is why we respect someone like Miles Davis so much, because Miles was able to do this continually over and over again throughout his career. So that's where we are with these videos, and when we've come to an end here. I've spent a long time going through these Mahavishnu Orchestra albums, trying to get deep into them, trying to, express what they mean to me, and I think what they mean to people who watch this channel. They are about a certain flavour which no other music possesses. And I think it's very difficult to talk about the quality of these albums without taking that into account. I think the best Mahavishnu Orchestra albums are the ones that carry the spirit of the Mahavishnu Orchestra within them. And I think that would be Inner Mountain Flame, Birds of Fire, and for me, Visions of the Emerald Beyond. That flavour is on Between Nothingness and Eternity, but the band is under stress, and I can hear it in the music, right? Apocalypse is a new conception of that sound in Embryo, and it's 90% successful, but on Visions we hear it. On Inner Worlds it's not really there that much, and that vibe, that Mahavishnu thing, is not on these two albums either. That sound we can hear it in other music. I hear it elsewhere. I hear it in the 70s King Crimson. It's the same sound. That sound that's on Starless and the Bible Black, Lark's Tongues in Aspic, Red, and USA. That sound's there. I hear it minus the spiritual questing in the albums that Jan Hammer went on to do, which would be things like Oh Yeah and Melodies, and the first solo album, which the name escapes me, I'm sure we'll be able to put it in there, the first 7 days, there we go. And it crops up elsewhere. It's a sound. The Mahavishnu Orchestra is a sound, it's a vibe, it's an experience, it's a thing unique to the Mahavishnu Orchestra. That is what makes that band so special. Is it there in Mcgofflin's music? Every now and then you see a glimpse of it. Every now and then that sound emerges. But what Mcgofflin went on to do when he was at his best was pioneering other ideas and doing other stuff for guitar, which is the way it should be. As this video comes out, and I'm not too sure when this video will be coming out, but John Mcgofflin's just turned 80. So happy birthday, John. I would... Wow, wouldn't it be weird if he sat there watching these videos? But if you are watching those videos, John, these videos, happy birthday, happy 80th birthday. Thank you for all the music. You've changed my life. You've changed so many people's lives. That's all I've got to say. I think my time here talking about Mahavishnu is done. We move on to other things. 2022. Where's this channel going to go? I don't know, but it's about to change. Anyway, let's leave it there. Please like, subscribe, drop a comment in, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye.